Do you think Google Ads are easy to set up or hard to set up? I asked because I was having a conversation about this yesterday on a coaching call with a new client. She's been working with Google Ads for 12 years, so she's also an expert, but she wanted me to come in and put some fresh eyes on an account she was having trouble with. And it was interesting because over the course of the call, it's not like I told her anything she didn't know, but having that different perspective allowed us to get into some really good, detailed conversations about different features of Google Ads. And what we discussed and decided over the course of the hour is that it's really easy, perhaps even too easy, to launch a Google Ads campaign, but really hard to get a grasp on all the different settings and options and features and ensure you're using them in the best way for your business. So that's what we're here to talk about today. What settings should you use for your Google Ads campaigns? I'm your host, Jyll Saskin Gales. I spent 6 years working for big brands at Google, and now I work for you. This is Inside Google Ads, episode 25, Campaign Settings. Our first question comes from Godson OC on TikTok, and they ask, why do a campaign without guidance? This comes from the advice I get a lot, whether it's in my free social media content, in my course, my coaching calls, that when you create a new campaign in Google Ads, I always recommend choosing without guidance at the first step. Why is that? Many people believe, erroneously, that campaign objective you choose at the beginning is like your bid strategy. It's telling Google if you want to achieve brand awareness or sales or offline leads or whatever. But that's not what it is at all. It's more like a choose your own adventure. And Google is asking up front what your objective is so it can narrow the options available to you later. We don't want to do that. When we're setting up a Google Ads campaign, we want to make sure we have all options available to us so that if we then choose video campaign, we get all the video campaign subtypes. Or if we then choose search campaign, we can choose the settings we want to choose. So when you're creating a Google Ads campaign, start a campaign without guidance as the first step, and then choose the campaign type you want, and then go on from there. As my daughter would say, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Our next question comes from Sam S. on TikTok, and they ask, why not? This is in response to a video where I said that you shouldn't use auto-apply recommendations. Why not? Well, let's back up a step to what are recommendations, what are auto-apply recommendations, and then why you probably shouldn't use them. Recommendations are things that Google Ads surfaces in your account, and it suggests you should do for improved performance. Things like adding broad match keywords, fixing your conversion tracking, adding more assets to your responsive search ads, etc. There are dozens of these. Now, on their own, these recommendations can potentially be a good idea. Like you probably do want to add image assets. You probably do want to have proper conversion tracking. But what most people don't realize is the same recommendations are surfaced in every account. They are customized to your account. So for example, if you already have image assets, it won't say to add image assets because you have them already, but there's like a set library of, 40 to 50 of these, and Google checks all accounts and recommends the same ones everywhere. So some of them are pretty innocuous, but some of them, like changing all your keywords to broad match or adding new keywords or changing your bid strategy, can have a huge impact. That's not necessarily what's best for your business. So I do recommend you look at the recommendations. They can be helpful and you can accept or dismiss based on your judgment. Now, if you have auto-apply recommendations turned on, that gives Google Ads permission to automatically apply, to basically accept all the recommendations it wants to. And this could potentially wreak havoc on your account if you see that all of a sudden, or maybe you won't even notice, oh, Google's just added 100 new keywords, or oh, Google's just created a whole new ad for you. It could have good results, but it could have disastrous results. And we don't want that. We like to have, at least a little bit of control over our campaign. So for that reason, I don't recommend using auto-apply recommendations. Before we get to our third question today, a quick reminder that you can get the transcript of Inside Google Ads episodes delivered to your inbox every Thursday. Sign up for free at free.jyll.ca. That's JYLL.ca. And at that same link, you could also sign up for my monthly Google Ads newsletter or my monthly small business marketing newsletter if either of those interest you as well. Our third question today comes from Browsers on TikTok, and they ask, do you always use 7-day attribution for Google? No, I don't use 7-day, but let's back up. What is attribution? Attribution is how you give credit to various marketing initiatives for driving results for your business. Let me give you a practical example. And in something very rare for me, I'm going to use a sports analogy here. So let's say you're playing hockey and player 1 passes the puck to player 2, and then player 2 scores a goal, right? So player 2 scored the goal, player 1 assisted by passing the puck to them. So how do we give credit? Who gets credit for that goal? Well, on player 2's stats, it's going to say that they are the one who scored the goal. But we acknowledge that player 1 also deserves some credit for that, because if they hadn't passed the puck to player 2 would have never had the puck in the first place to score that goal. So player 1 might get what's called an assist. Sorry if my hockey terminology is not right. Don't kick me out of Canada. And so similarly, let's replace player 1 with Google Ads and player 2 with Meta ads. So let's say a user searches for something, they click on a Google ad, go to a website, and leave. The next day, an ad is served to them on Instagram. They click on that ad, and then they convert. They buy. So Instagram ads would get the last click attribution for that purchase, because that was the last click the user did before purchasing. But we know, like, Google Ads probably also deserves some credit, because if they hadn't clicked on the Google ad in the first place, then they wouldn't have been on the remarketing list for them to get served the Instagram ad. So if we were using a first click attribution, we would say, you know what, Google Ads gets all the credit for that. Google Ads drove the conversion, Meta ads didn't. That's first click versus last click. Those are two of the variety of attribution models you can use. Now let's take this a step further. If we were to look in the Google Ads interface, we would see that there was a Google ad click on one day and the next day a purchase. And Google would say, I did that, I get all the credit, because Google can't see the meta that happened, right? It just sees itself and then the purchase. So Google's going to say, I drove conversion. Now, if you were to look in your Meta ads interface, Meta would say, hey, someone clicked on my ad and then converted. I get the credit for that, because Meta doesn't see the Google ads click that happened the day before either. So Google's going to say it drove a conversion. Meta's going to say it drove a conversion. That's two conversions, but only one purchase actually happened. Now, if we look in Google Analytics, or a tool that can see everything, Google Analytics would see the Google ads click and then the Meta ads click and the purchase. And depending what attribution model you choose there, it'll designate that accordingly. For most of the years of digital marketing, last click was what we used, because it was the easiest to see the last click that happened before purchasing, right? So in a last click world, Meta ads gets all the credit. In a first click world, Google ads would get all the credit. There's a linear attribution model, and that assigns credit equally. So we would say 50% to Google, 50% to Meta. There's a time decay attribution model, which means those touch points that happen closer to conversion get more credit. So maybe with time decay, Google ads would get 1/3 of the credit and Meta ads would get 2/3 of the credit. But all that to say, what most people use now, the default in Google ads, is something called data-driven attribution. DDA. And this is really misunderstood. Most people just say, oh, DDA, yeah, it uses machine learning to figure it out. And that's true, but it does something really compelling. So let's go back to our hockey example of player 1 and player 2. Player 1 passes to player 2 scores the goal. What data-driven attribution does is it looks at the rest of player 1's stats. It says, okay, how many other times did player 1 pass the puck to someone? And how many of those resulted in a goal? And how many of those didn't result in a goal? And then what about when player 1 is the one who actually scores the goal? Or what about when player 1 actually hit the puck towards the goal and it didn't go in? So it's looking at all these different scenarios to determine the likelihood of the impact of player 1's contribution. And it does the same for player 2. It says, okay, player 2 scored this goal. How many attempts does player 2 make on net? How often does it go in or not? How is that different when player 2 gets an assist versus when player 2 gets the puck on their own and then shoots it in? How about when player 2 gets an assist from player 1 versus when player 2 gets an assist from player 3? And again, it's not just looking at the converting paths, it's looking at the non-converting paths, all the times they missed the goal, to judge how important player 1 and player 2's contributions are. Machine learning can do that. Humans can't, right? AI is powerful. And so that's what data-driven attribution does. It really takes the guesswork out, because it looks at the converting paths and non-converting paths to figure out just how integral each of those touch points is. And in this example, we only have 2 touch points before conversion, the Google Ads interaction and the Meta Ads interaction. But in the real world, real people can have 5, 10, 20 different interactions before purchasing from you, depending, of course, what your product or service offering is. So data-driven attribution is a great solution because it can look at all of that and say, okay, I've decided we think that Google Ads deserves 0.25 of the credit and Meta Ads deserves 0.75 of the credit for this conversion. It could be different for other conversions and other scenarios, but it's going to figure that out for you. So back to Browser's question, do you always use 7-day attribution for Google? No, the default in Google Ads is 30 days. For a click-based, view-through is smaller if you are accounting for view-through conversions. And I usually use 30 days. I don't usually change that. It can really depend on your business. And the best way to know is to see if there's a conversion lag, meaning a time delay between when someone clicks on your ad and when they actually convert. So for example, one business that I'm advising, there can be up to a 20-day conversion lag between when someone clicks the Google ad and when they actually make the purchase. So I want to make sure that I have an attribution window of at least 20 days. In this case, we have 30 days to account for that. Whereas if I were working with another business where when someone clicks on the ad, they tend to convert same day, I could potentially use a smaller attribution window. People who work in Meta Ads or TikTok ads or other kind of social ads often have smaller windows like 7 days or even 1 day, because often those work on a view through attribution. So it means that someone may not click on the ad, they just see the ad in their feed, and then they go look up the website themselves or something and then convert. So lots of nitty-gritty you can get into here around attribution, but I generally stick with the default Google Ads settings, which is 30-day click attribution and a data-driven attribution model. All right, today's Insider Challenge is based on a real client situation that my colleagues and I faced when I worked at Google. You would all know the name of the company this is based on, so I won't say it. I don't want to get in trouble, but here's the challenge. Say you have a client who is a high-growth startup. Their goal is to scale as large as possible, as fast as possible, and their budget is seemingly unlimited, at least the largest you've ever managed. Wouldn't that be nice? Would this change how you think about the attribution model? What attribution model in Google Ads would you consider? And for this example, let's just pretend DDA is not an option, because for most scenarios, I'll say, yeah, data-driven attribution. Let's say that that's not around. What would you choose? First click, last click, time decay, linear, something else? You can participate by sending me your response to this challenge or any episode's challenge. The beauty of the Insider Challenge is there's no right or wrong answer, just an opportunity to stretch your brain on real-life Google Ads problem solving. Shoot me an email at thegooglepro@jyll.ca, that's JYLL.ca, or send me a voice note in my Instagram DMs. I'm _Google_pro on Instagram. Last episode's challenge was this. How would you reach dental hygienists using Google Ads? And this was a real scenario I faced with a client a couple years ago. So here's how I would go about this. I would start by Googling it. So I Googled dental hygienist to see what kind of stuff came up, what the suggested searches were, what the people also asked were. And I noticed that most of the searches were about people who want to become a dental hygienist, looking for training programs or how much they make. And so I don't want that. That is not my audience of people thinking of becoming a dental hygienist. That's almost like negatives, right? I want people who are dental hygienists. So that was a good thing for me to see for some potential negatives I might need to have around kind of training and salaries and things like that. So I looked at the Wikipedia article about dental hygienists and what dental hygienists do, and it mentioned a procedure called periodontal charting, which is something they do. And so I Googled that and found a website called periotools.com. And this looked like a site that dental hygienists would use to help them with their periodontal charting. So one potential input already for a custom segment, either via search terms or via websites they visit. Next, in the Wikipedia article, I saw that some dental hygienists also perform x-rays as well. And I would imagine if you're a dental hygienist who can also do radiography, as it's called, you probably would make more money. So I looked at training programs for that, dental radiography training. That is something that unless you're already a dental hygienist, you probably wouldn't search for the additional dental radiography training. So that would be a training program that dental hygienists might search for, something else to add to our custom segment. And then one more thing I saw in the Wikipedia article in the timeline of dental hygienists is that there is an American Dental Hygienists Association, the ADHA, and there are equivalents in many other countries as well. So I went to that website, and I thought this would also be a great thing for inclusion in our custom segment. So this was just 2 minutes of Googling. I found a bunch of search terms and websites I could potentially use in a custom segment that I could use to target dental hygienists. And if this were my client, I would spend more than 2 minutes. I would probably spend maybe 20 or so. I'd make a list of search terms of websites and apps that I want to target. And also if I came across anything I'd want to potentially have as a negative, like dental hygienist training programs, dental hygienist salary, those would be potential negative keywords for a search campaign. And then I'd present that back to my client and get their feedback on it. Because of course, my client probably knows dental hygienists much more than I do with my 20 minutes of Googling. What do you think? Would you consider the same things or something totally different? Shoot me an email at thegooglepro@jyll.ca, that's JYLL.ca, or send me a voice note in my Instagram DMs, _Google_pro. I'm Jyll Saskin Gales, and I'll see you next time inside Google Ads.